I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're turning our attention to some of the good government bills that made their way through both houses of the state legislature, as well as some that fell a little short. To make sense of these measures and why the public should care, I'm joined in the studio by Blair Horner, Senior Policy Advisor at the New York Public Interest Research Group. Thanks for making the time, Blair.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with a bill that is designed to make it easier for the public to access financial disclosure filings from candidates for state office, which are currently only available via a records request, while the filings from incumbents are proactively disclosed online. The lizard brain that I have immediately goes to this idea that this is just so incumbents don't have to have a paper trail when they look for their potential opponent's record as they begin to do opposition research. What's your, hopefully, more reasonable perspective on why this matters to the public?
Well, with my lizard face, I will answer what you said from your lizard brain. I think it's just, these requirements start from years ago, and to actually, create a system where you could have lots of filings, because you're talking about all candidates. So that means the Working Families Party candidate may not be the Democratic Party candidate, the Conservative. So you're talking multiples of information. They've only made available online the incumbents, no matter what political party, not the challengers. And while that's useful, we would agree that you should have all the candidates listed on there, because that may help voters make an informed decision about who they like or who they don't like. It also creates, the system itself is designed to sort of deal with the bigger problem, which is how do you reduce the corruption risk at the state capitol? And you do that by getting more people to pay attention to what's going on. And the easier you make them do that, the better the effect.
From a practical perspective, though, it's hard to imagine there are a lot of New York voters, or any New York voters, who are going to the state website to check these out. And there's even fewer reporters these days. So is anyone minding the shop, so to speak?
Well, I do. I look at them.
But you're just one man, Blair.
I think for reporters that are putting together background materials on elected officials, I think it's a very useful resource. And for those who are covering the campaigns, it's a useful resource to have at your fingertips the financial backgrounds, to the extent that these reports tell us anything, the financial backgrounds and potential conflicts of interest the candidates have. So that's good. How widely or narrowly they get used is a function of how well the public knows it exists. And one of the proposals that was kicking around the legislature was to require that campaign websites would have a notice that this information was available and where to go to get it.
Well, thinking about the usefulness of this information and how it might be used more effectively in the future, does it make sense to have a state body that is just combing through these filings for potential conflicts of interest? Or is this all kind of in the eye of the beholder, and it's up to the voters and the public to then weigh whether this matters for the purposes of elections, and it really doesn't have a usefulness beyond that?
Well, I'd say it's both, right? The agency itself is supposed to look them over. And on the legislative side, when the ethics filings are submitted, they're done basically in paper format. And they come in May. They're due in May. The Legislative Ethics Commission reviews them before they go public in June. And presumably that's to find the people that messed up the filing or forgot to send submitted, is to alert them. So again, the agencies should be looking at these things. They can provide some useful information, and it also empowers the public.
But it seems like those watchdogs, so to speak, are really just looking for technical mistakes in the filings. They're not necessarily looking to say, hey, you own a lot of this stock and you passed a lot of bills dealing with this issue and there's some overlap. They're not looking for things like that, right?
I don't think so. I think you're absolutely right. They're just looking at whether or not they're filed, they're complete, and there's really no way for the agency to double check it unless they were requiring lawmakers, all elected officials, public officials, to submit their tax filings.
Well, another bill that made its way through both houses of the legislature, overwhelmingly, in fact, is a bill that requires electronic filings of all lobbying filings. And this addresses the fact that under current law, many lobbyists and their clients will file lobbying statements and reports via paper, which given the scope of lobbying in New York, means that there's a lot of paperwork to go through. So what's your take on this? I mean, should we just think about this as making the lives of lobbyists a little easier, or is there a broader benefit to something like this?
Well, the vast majority, as my understanding is, the vast majority of lobbyists do file electronically. We do, for example, and it is. I think it's easier, obviously, for the agency. And it does lessens the burden for the agency. All of that information is subject to random audits, and to the extent that they're all sort of in the same sort of formatting, allows you to do searches. So, for example, this information is also posted on the state portal, and so you can download this information for previous years if one wanted to. If they're working on a PhD thesis, for example, in special influence peddling at the state capitol.
Or just want to impress people at parties.
Yes, it is. It is a big hot topic around the pigs in a blanket, wine in the plastic cup circles.
Sure.
Mine. Circles, by the way. Again, one step back. Influence peddling is a big deal, and it's a big problem everywhere in America because the way the system is set up is if you have a lot of money, you can put your thumb on the scale on behalf of yourself or your client. And the U.S. Supreme Court has made it very hard to do anything about that other than to require public disclosure. And so these are little component pieces that try to fill up holes that exist in the system or make the system work better. If the system works better, presumably the public has easier access. If the public has easier access, it holds people accountable. We drive faster on the throughways when there are no speed traps. This is the same kind of sort of theory when it comes to disclosure.
Yeah, and there is that practical benefit, though, because if the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government is getting a whole bunch of paper submissions, they're the ones manually entering that, and this means that the information is going to be, like you said, more standardized, get up online faster, easier to search. But before we get to some of the items that didn't make it across the finish line, let me reintroduce you. For listeners just joining us, I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Blair Horner, the Senior Policy Advisor at the New York Public Interest Research Group. So there were two bills that you flagged for us, and they both have to do with shining a light on what people are pushing either one way or another on issues, and whether they're involved in lobbying at all. So can you explain these two bills?
Well, the first one, right now when you're a lobbyist, you report the bill you work on, the utility rate you're working on, the state agency rule, whatever the heck it is, local government, municipal ordinance, whatever it is that you're working on. You have to report it. So Assembly Bill 123 gets reported. But you never have to disclose, do you support or oppose whatever the proposal is.
It's direct activity, monitoring only, grassroots, who I might have talked to.
Right. But it doesn't make it clear to the public what side you're on. Now, for the insiders, that probably is easily figured out.
Sure.
But not always. And even when I've talked to insiders about this, they're like, well, that'd be a very useful thing. Everyone says the same thing. The problem is it didn't pass. And so the requirement that you have to, have a pull-down menu that says yes, no, or monitoring or whatever the heck it is that they would want to do, that proposal did not pass both houses. It passed the state Senate. And we think that would make perfect sense. And so that's sort of a better way to look at the data that's being disclosed. The other issue is a loophole in the law. So under New York law, if you get paid $5,000 or expend $5,000 or more, you have to report your activities. And, as I mentioned before, it's about legislation, utility rates, agency rules, regulations, municipal government decisions, whatever the heck it is. Those are covered. But there's a loophole, a big one, and it's it basically says under New York law right now that if you're lobbying to influence a resolution, you have to report it. Mm-hmm. So if the legislature is meeting in joint session to pick a board of regents, a nominee to the board of regents, and approve that gets reported. But under New York law, if you're seeking to influence the appointment of someone to a government agency, it's not considered lobbying.
So a commissioner, a judge, what have you, the regional transportation authorities all over the state, where it shows up even in other weird ways. So I just gave you an example of one case where somebody's a nominee for an agency, the Board of Regents. They have to disclose it. If you're being appointed to be the commissioner for some agency, it doesn't have to be reported. It doesn't have to be reported, for example, if you're lobbying to influence who goes on the Public Service Commission, which a lot of interest groups probably care about. Sure.
But if you're attempting to influence the utility rates, or any other decision by the PSC, it is lobbying. So you have to disclose if you're lobbying to influence the decision of the PSC, but it's not lobbying if you're trying to influence who the people are that make that decision.
Right.
And so it's just a loophole in the law. For some weird reason, I still don't know why, the Assembly has, in the last couple of years, has just refused to take it up. And the Senate passes it. And it was the example of what drew people's attention to this was the fight over the chief judge a number of years ago, where a lot of money was spent on both sides and didn't have to be reported.
Sure.
So again, that makes perfect sense to us that if you're seeking to influence a government decision, an important one, by the way, that you should be required to report it just like you do anything else.
Well, coming back to the legislation that would require lobbyists disclose not just if they were lobbying on a bill, but whether they supported or opposed it, we've heard from lobbyists that the proposal kicking around Albany doesn't capture the nuance involved in Albany. For example, you might support something but still want amendments, or maybe you're opposed to something unless there were amendments. So given the nuance that's involved in lobbying.
Yeah, well, again, if they're issuing paper in particular, right? I mean, that's the way that anybody knows that anybody's lobbying, unless you remember the person you talk to, and you're reporting your activities to the agency. I mean, you take positions on the bills. That's the whole point of advocacy. It's not to say that we're just sort of calmly watching things go by. And so, if the problem is there weren't enough options in the drop-down menu, then you just add to it. It's not that big of a deal. But we think the public has a right to know if an interest group, particularly a big one, is spending money to influence legislation or utility activities or agency decisions or municipal decisions, and that the public needs to know that, and they need to know what side of that they fall on. Now, again, you may be, I support the original bill, then the amended version comes out, you say Assembly Bill 123A, I'm now opposed. That's not hard to do. We live in the 21st century.
Given your history in this building, I'm curious, do you feel like the Albany that we operate in now is less corrupt or has more safeguards, is a cleaner atmosphere than years past when we used to routinely see people led away in cuffs or indicted by federal prosecutors?
And the short answer is yes. I think it is better. I mean, I've been lobbying here since 1984, and the culture was more, like summer camp for adults back in the 80s.
Socially, too.
Yeah, socially, too. And the campaign finance system was completely out of control. And so now you still have, in my view, a bad campaign finance system. I mean, there are good aspects to it, but it's still a bad system. You can give gigantic campaign contributions to the political parties who then can transfer it to the candidates of their choice. And you can give unlimited amounts to the soft money accounts, which, just to show they have a sense of humor, are called housekeeping. And so it's better. There are more safeguards in place, and the safeguards have been driven by scandal. I mean, that's normally what happens around here. In terms of big changes to happen, either in terms of campaign finance or ethics or lobbying, it's in response to something terrible that happened. It makes more sense, from our view, to reduce the corruption risk by having a better system, and that's what we've been talking about so far.
Right now, we have one-party rule in Albany, and when I think about what led to some of the good government changes in the past, like the nonpartisan redistricting, which definitely had its flaws, but was not a brazen attempt to gerrymander like the redistricting amendment that Democrats moved earlier this year. Do you think that with one-party government, it is less likely to embrace good government ideas because there isn't that pressure or, I guess, mutually assured destruction or something else, or the idea that there's a minority party that can hold people accountable? Because, like in the state Senate, we used to have Republicans concerned about losing power to the Democrats. Now, Democrats aren't really worried about losing either chamber and don't really have to try to appeal to voters in good government sense. I mean, do you think any of that impacts what moves or doesn't move?
Just to go back to the Redistricting Commission for a moment, they're not independent.
No one said the word independent. I said nonpartisan
they're
redistricting.
Not nonpartisan. They are bipartisan.
I said the structure of the commission is bipartisan, but they don't allow for partisan gerrymandering.
That's
it is
right.
a nonpartisan district
right.
redistricting
Yeah,
in terms of what they're supposed to be considering for criteria.
That is exactly right. That's verboten under the Constitution.
Currently. Who knows for how much longer.
That's right. But to your question about does one-party rule make it better or worse, I mean, it's more likely or less likely that they will embrace good government proposals. I think the answer is it's just as bad, the options, as they've ever been. Because fundamentally, most of the people in this place do not view good government issues as something that moves the public. The public, clearly polling-wise, cares a lot about corruption, and they care a lot about corruption in government. But it's 10th on a list, right? It's not the first thing that people think about because they sort of accept that democracy is a work in progress, and sometimes it's a mess. So that being said, so the big changes though were driven by scandals, and where the scandals start in Albany is the result of people letting their guard down, thinking that they can just do whatever the heck they want to do, and when they get away with that, then they take one click more, and you end up with an actual scandal. And so yes, I don't think one-party rule one way or the other makes that big of a difference. I mean, the parties are much more likely to look out for the party's interest than you have a bipartisan system. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will be warmer or colder to good government proposals. On that happy note.
Well, we've been speaking with Blair Horner. He's the Senior Policy Advisor at the New York Public Interest Research Group. Blair, thanks for visiting us in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of the Capitol Press Room. For an insider take on what's happening in state government, check out our Dispatches from Planet Albany show, available wherever you get podcasts or at capitolpressroom.org.
Join us again for Capitol Press Room, a production of WCNY Connected, Syracuse.